On your side, a very old practice is giving new hope to cancer patients.
Researchers are looking into the benefits of starving cancer. It's a practice one member of our 9 on Your Side family tried in a battle to save himself. Tanya O'Rourke has his story.
The current state of health in the U.S. is shocking. According to the Journal of the American Medical Association, 35% of adults are obese and 50% either have diabetes or pre-diabetes. Doctors say these diet-related health conditions that also include cancer and heart disease have many of us headed toward a future of huge medical bills, even an early death.
This idea that you wait until you have 1, 2, 3 diseases and then you put a Band-Aid on top of it, it's just a bad idea.
That's Dr. Walter Longo, a leading researcher on fasting. He spoke to us via Skype about his groundbreaking research.
Fasting is really a remarkable intervention, meaning there is so much happening that it's hard to think of another intervention that could even get close to that.
Longo's research has shown that cancer cells are weakened during a fast and are more susceptible to chemotherapy while healthy cells are protected. And that caught the interest of 9 on Your Side reporter Jay Warren.
I was diagnosed with oral cancer this past April, and and I'd never chewed, never smoked, was never a heavy drinker, am not now, and it's really kind of a head scratcher for people.
Jay had a cancer on the side of his tongue that was surgically removed.
One of the things too that was also caught my eye is actually not eating at all, and the beneficial effects of fasting and what it can possibly do as it relates to cancer really caught my eye.
So Jay embarked on a fast of his own under the close supervision of Dr. Angela Fitch of UC Health's Weight Loss Center.
So it'll be interesting to see how well he can stick with it. But when you're motivated by something, when you're motivated by your health, I think in particular, it gives you a different perspective.
For 6 days, Jay ate 250 calories or less per day and checked in with Dr. Fitch along the way. When he went back, his results were quite profound. When he started, Jay's fasted blood glucose was 87 milligrams, which is considered normal. But after the fast, it was down to 67.
Yeah, well, one of the most fascinating things was the drop in your IGF-1, which we know is a growth type of hormone. And so it dropped by about 25%, which is a fairly significant drop for just that short amount of days. And so that would potentially make a difference with things like cancer growth.
Afterwards, Jay told me the experience was difficult, but not impossible.
So at one point, my family was having dinner, and I had to go upstairs. I was so hungry. But then there was another time when I had more energy than I knew what to do with. It was really remarkable.
Jay says he plans to make periodic fasting part of his life going forward in his fight against cancer. As for Longo, he says his mimicking diet will soon be ready for doctors to prescribe to their patients.
Dr. Longo says that his fasting mimicking diet is the safest way to realize the benefits of this type of intervention. And tonight, 5 months after Jay's surgery, we are happy to report that he remains cancer-free.
Dr. Dunn, it is an incredible honor to have the opportunity to learn from you and the research that you've done over your entire career around autophagy. Can you tell us a little bit about what first got you interested in autophagy?
So basically, I started, got my PhD at Penn State University, and I sort of was interested in autophagy then a little bit, but we weren't really doing anything like that. Did a postdoc at Albert Einstein, then moved to Johns Hopkins. But anyhow, when I was at Hopkins, I had to find a different direction to get away from the lab I was in. So I decided we're going to go do autophagy because at that time, autophagy needed a different angle. Everything that was looked at in autophagy was biochemistry, and I decided to go to the cell biology part.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, sort of like in a nutshell, what is autophagy? And we're going to talk more about this later, but the Nobel Prize in Medicine was won just in 2016 for autophagy. So how many years ago, roughly, did you first get interested in autophagy, and then define it quickly for us?
I got interested in autophagy over 30 years ago.
Wow.
Now, it was defined by Christian de Duve back in the 60s. 1960s and such. And he identified it based on morphology, just looking at the cells by electron microscopy. And he actually was able to see these vacuoles, which were unusual. And Christian de Duve, who won the Nobel Prize also by identifying lysosomes,
Wow.
and some other organelles, but predominantly lysosomes. And he did this by a variety of methods, but the first method, one of the best methods, was electron microscopy, when you could actually visually see the cell and look what's in the cell. So he found these unusual structures, very unusual structures that were membrane bound, that were within the cell. And these structures had cell components in there. So he came up with the idea of autophagy, or self-eating.
Yes.
So the cell was actually eating itself. It was grabbing itself, its organelles, its cytoplasm, parts of itself, and putting them into vacuoles, which would then end up in the lysosomes.
So if I were to sort of give an analogy almost, within the house, which is like the cell, right? So if we're in our house, the autophagy is essentially doing the housekeeping within the house, so that the house sparkles and is looking beautiful, and ultimately for the cell, it's in its most healthy form. How would you what analogy would you give us?
So basically, I mean, when it was first examined by de Duve, he just thought it was pathology. He really thought there was something wrong going on in the cell. This is not a normal process.
This cleansing.
This cleansing, or this self-eating.
Self-eating.
And you can see, I mean, you can understand, why would the cell want to eat itself?
Right.
Yeah, so at that time, they thought there was something going on. And then when Mortimer came up on board, and that was the person that really got me into the field, he realized that this process was activated when the cells were starved of amino acids. So he put 2 and 2 together, that indeed when the amino acids were low in the cell then was eating itself to provide the cell with amino acids. So he considered this process of autophagy more of essential for cell survival, so that the cells can survive various stresses, nutrient stresses.
Right.
And such. Then it got more interesting more and more years later. But anyhow, at that point in time, that's when I got interested in it, as to what was going on. It needed the cell biology approach, and I started working on it at Hopkins, and ever since after I left Hopkins, I've been at the University of Florida, which has really been beneficial to me, because back then when I first started, the best way of examining and looking at autophagy was by electron microscopy. That's a big microscopes, high resolution microscopes basically, which only usually anatomy cell biology departments have. First it started with cancer. So it became interesting in cancer. So cancer, there was 2 basically fields of thought. One was the cancer cells shut down autophagy, and that will allow the cells to grow more because they're not degrading themselves. So they can build and grow faster and and divide more.
The healthy cells or the cancer cells?
The cancer cells.
Got it.
The cancer cells. So one train of thought was the fact that with the cancer cells, the fact that they grow so well is they don't degrade, they don't eat themselves. So they grow real well. The other train of thought was the fact that the autophagy protects the cells. So there were 2 things that were actually going on, and actually both of those things are actually true now as well, depending upon the different cancers. When they were looking at the cancers, and they were looking at the chemotherapy agents, the effects of chemotherapy on the cancers, and they were seeing that some of these cancers were more resistant to the chemotherapy. So they started looking at, well, maybe it's the autophagy that's actually being activated to protect the cell. So with the LC3 marker, yes, they were seeing the autophagy actually turning on.
To protect the
to
cell.
protect the cell. So at that time, there were a number of inhibitors that were out there. None of them that were very specific, but there were a number of inhibitors out there. So these were compounds that were used routinely. So when they added these compounds in the presence of the chemotherapy agents, the cells were dying faster. That's because you shut down the cell protection by shutting down the autophagy. And that sort of really got people really interested in looking at ways of inhibiting autophagy.
What is your dream of where this work, your life's work, will go over the next decade?
I'm hoping that we can regulate autophagy in such a way that we can cure some of the diseases, or basically make the cells healthier, to avoid the cancers, to avoid the pathogens that we are exposed to and such like that. Possibly we're getting back to aging again, really to make the cells healthier for longer periods of time and such. But that's a little tricky, because you really at times you want to turn it off, but other times you want to turn it on. For aging, you sort of want to turn it on. You know, you really want to basically help the cell, or tell the cell that you really want to get rid of the old organelles and such like that. In older cells, the autophagy pathway is a little bit reduced. It's not as efficient.
Right.
So the idea is to activate it and turn it on. Now, during normal growth of the tumor, when the blood supply has yet to come in, the tumors are turning on autophagy to survive. So you would actually want to shut down autophagy at that particular time as well, before the blood supply gets to the tumor. So different conditions, you want to turn off autophagy. Other conditions, you want to turn on autophagy. So there's a big area now of looking at the role of autophagy in metastasis of the tumors. Not only inhibiting the tumors, but also in the metastasis of the tumors. So again, when you wake up in the morning, you haven't eaten in a while, autophagy's kicked in. That's because your amino acid levels in the bloodstream are low.
Right. And for example, I'm intermittent fasting this morning, so I won't be eating probably until sometime later on this afternoon. And I know that the intermittent fasting is also helping to activate the autophagy in my body. And because my body is I hope, healthy, I'm getting that anti-aging, youth-activating cellular effect.
Yes, basically you're right. So sometimes the intermittent fasting is sometimes easier for some people than other people.
Right.
You're really pretty much starving when you wake up. You're really
Right.
hungry when you wake up. But once you get past 9 or 10 o'clock, then it sort of seems to be okay. But you have to be engaged in something, so you're really not even thinking about, boy, I'm hungry right now.
And you're intermittent fasting specifically to activate your autophagy?
Yeah. Yeah, mine is specifically to go after the autophagy.
Yeah.
Mostly with the heart and stuff like that.
Tell us a little bit about the heart.
Well, the heart, like I said, those cells are not dividing. And basically with the heart, which beats all the time and requires a lot of ATP, the mitochondria age relatively quickly compared to other cell types that don't require as much ATP as the heart does. So you really have to have a good functional autophagy pathway, or a way of keeping it turned on, to get rid of the damaged mitochondria, or to get rid of the damaged organelles in the heart. So that's sort of one of the reasons I'm more interested in it, is really to give me a better, healthier heart.
Fascinating. So heart health, liver health, any of the organs or any parts of our body where the cells are not dividing, those are the organs or the cells that we really need to take the best care of and activate the autophagy in those types of cells.
Correct. The kidney was actually the most active in looking at in turning on autophagy. And very few people are actually studying the role of autophagy in the kidney function and such, but it was looked at as being one of the most active organs turning on autophagy.
If you could sort of wave your magic wand and have an area of focus around autophagy and disease prevention, where the researchers really put their attention there, where would you want the scientists to be working?
Mine would be more cancer. And basically I would think, the cancer I would pick would be the bone cancers, the osteosarcomas right now. The reason I'm keen on osteosarcomas is because that hits a lot of the younger people, the kids and such. I would love to see more focus on that. Aging, I don't know about aging. Aging is going to happen, unfortunately. I'm not sure how well you could slow it down. Not sure.
Dr. Dunn, it's just so fascinating to learn from you and the work that you've done over the past 30 years is such important work, and it's a true honor to be able to sit and have this conversation. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for asking me.
Hi, Greg Whitmore from Tiny Mountain Wellness. Kind of a cool thing happened recently. I've become an adjunct professor through Central Washington University, my alma mater. You and I are the same in that we're both searching out the truth when it comes to health and wellness. And there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And quite frankly, some things have changed and we're teaching things differently than we used to. I talk more about intermittent fasting and how it helped me with my autoimmune disease. So with that, let's dive right in.
Hi, Greg Whitmore, Tiny Mountain Wellness. Thanks for joining me today. I talked about how I stumbled upon the fact that I had an autoimmune disease. Back in 2010, I got that stiff neck and the pain developed, got worse, I got depressed, and all the trials and tribulations I went through to come out with knowing that I had an autoimmune disease. And then, as we talked about, I weaned myself off some medication, prednisone, where I wasn't taking it, and it went away, and I was sure that maybe I'd kick that disease and I wouldn't ever have to deal with it again. Lo and behold, 2016, I started getting pain in my hands and down my leg, and found out that that autoimmune disease was back. Again, 2016, pain returned. I went back on the prednisone, still tried the 60, 50, 40, weaning myself down, hoping that once again that those symptoms would go away and I wouldn't have to take any prednisone. I didn't want to be on medication, and certainly not prednisone. So I left his office, kind of bummed that I'm still taking prednisone, and yet I told him that I would look into intermittent fasting. A little bit skeptical, but I'd look into it. So I started doing a little research. The main one that I really found a lot of value on was by Dr. Jason Fung. And in reading his theory of the inflammation, and I started intermittent fasting. So kind of struck me as interesting. So I stopped taking prednisone for my autoimmune disease, and the pain was still away. I didn't have any of those symptoms return. I was sleeping better than I ever had, and even though I was intermittently fasting, I had more energy than ever. Mental clarity seemed good. So over the course of those few months, I was really becoming a big believer in intermittent fasting. An added benefit, which I wasn't even really trying for, was in October when I started intermittent fasting, I weighed 226 pounds. Just 3 months later in January, I was down 30 pounds to 196. So I stumbled upon weight loss without even meaning to. And I've struggled with losing weight. My metabolism slowed down. It was harder and harder to shed some of those winter pounds. And yet 30 pounds just melted away and still feeling like a lot of energy. So I can tell you, just since last October, starting intermittent fasting, having researched it, I'm a huge believer. I want you to look at fasting with an open mind. Again, I've taught health for 28 years, so I was really skeptical about anything that involved fasting. And yet, now that I've researched it, I guarantee you, if you haven't heard of intermittent fasting, you will. And I believe it's going to be the normal eating pattern that we're going to be teaching here in the future.
Hi, good morning, and thanks for inviting me, Sam. This is a great pleasure to be here. I'm just going to dive right in, but before I start, I just wanted to say Sam has actually been very important in my kind of evolution, because a few years ago, about 3-4 years ago, as I was starting to think about these ideas of weight loss and obesity and so on, I read on the internet this young guy who has decided to do his this experiment on himself, where he would, eat the 5,000 calories. I'm like, this guy's like crazy, right? This guy's really like dope. So it's like, okay, and so he had 2 really different diets of 5,000 calories, and so every day he would measure himself, And what was really fascinating was that it really crystallized for me the failure of this sort of, oh, it's all about calories, calories in, calories out model. That has really been the kind of failing of all of us, and that's why we have this obesity epidemic, and that's really what we're still fighting against, and thank you to Sam for that as well. So I'm Dr. Jason Fung. I'm a nephrologist, and just I did give one talk for AstraZeneca at a request of a friend, but otherwise I don't take any consulting fees or anything from pharmaceuticals. Further disclosure, I have 2 books. One is about obesity and one is about fasting. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is a sort of a new idea. It's not a new idea, but it's one that has fallen out of vogue, and how we can use it really to help ourselves and help ourselves stay well. So some of you may know this show, The Biggest Loser. It's a very popular show all across the world, really. And what it does is it pits contestants against each other. And they're obese and they try to lose the most weight. Whoever loses the most weight at the end of the show is the winner. And what's very interesting is that they do very well, but Suzanne Mendonca on season 2 said NBC never does a reunion. Why? Because we're all fat again. And that's the truth of it, and anybody who's been on a diet knows this. So what's interesting is that you can look at what the sort of diet and exercise regimen they use. And what they advise is for you to reduce the amount of calories that you take in. So they were eating somewhere around a 1,200, 1,400 kilocalorie diet, and they exercise a lot. So that's what you see on the TV show. They spend 8 hours, 10 hours exercising. So this is really the classic sort of advice that we as doctors had given people. So reduce your portions, eat a little bit less, move a little bit more, except this was kind of on steroids for TV. And this is the reason why it gets ranked very well. So even so the US News, for example, they will rank diets, and they gave this kind of the number 3 overall weight loss diet, number 11 overall, so behind only a few diets out of like 30-something diets. So really supported by the establishment. But where's the evidence that this really works? And that's what's really lacking. So it's not like we don't have evidence for the calorie-reduced diet. We do. So if you look at the Today study, for example, you see on the green line it's metformin. So everybody got metformin. This was a study in diabetics. And they either got rosiglitazone, metformin alone, which is the middle line, and metformin plus lifestyle. So this is a sort of eat less, move more. So here's a randomized controlled trial of a lifestyle intervention, the eat less, move more approach, compared to, say, metformin alone. So at the beginning of the, if you look at the green line, for example, I don't know if I have a, do I have a pointer here? Yeah, so if you look at the green line, you start off at time 0 with a body mass index of 34. And so after all this time, you see 60 months, so 5 years, your body mass index is 34. So that was worth it, right? 5 years of exercise and weight loss, and your body mass index is identical. And the really tragic sort of part is that it's only identical because you had this real push at the end to drop it. Otherwise, you would have been kind of heavier than you were. And that's what the randomized control trials tell us, right? We profess that we live in an era of evidence-based medicine. And here's the evidence. So this is the diabetes prevention trial. So again, this is the lifestyle intervention. So again, at the beginning of time, you start with 0 kilograms. Initially, you do lose weight. And again, if you're ever dieted, which is probably like 95% of us, this is what happens. In the first 6 months, you do very well. So 6, 7 kilos off. But then at the end of it, there's no difference at the end of 5 years whether you did anything or you did nothing. So again, we say that this sort of intervention works. We profess that it does work, but the randomized control trial says it doesn't work. And really the biggest trial of nutrition that's ever been done was the Women's Health Initiative, which was published in 2006. So this is not new data. This is data that's more than 10 years old. And we all know what happens here. If you start at baseline, 1,788 calories, they reduce 360 calories per day. That's pretty good. And they increased their exercise. So if you look at metabolic equivalents per week, they went from 10 to 11.4. So you increase your exercise by roughly 10%, 11%, something like that. So terrific. So you decrease your calories by 360 per day, and you increase your exercise. So the calorie counters, they expected somewhere around 30 pounds of weight loss per year, because they're saying, oh yeah, you should lose a pound per 1 or 2 weeks. What actually happened, of course, is this. At the end of 9 years, so for year 1 you did very well, but the Eat Less, Move More, by the end of the trial, by 7, 8 years, there's not even a single pound of difference between the two, right? And this is a randomized controlled trial. So here's 3 randomized controlled trials of the Eat Less, Move More approach, and it really hasn't worked at all. So this is the translation. So we've proven again and again and again through trial data evidence that it doesn't work, and our clinical experience really says the same. If you look at the UK General Practice database, so over 10 years, 2004 to 2014, this is what your results are. So if you're obese, your probability of achieving a normal weight is 0.6%. If you're morbidly obese, it's 0.1%. So in other words, you have about a 99.4% failure rate. Okay? This 80% with 10% weight loss will regain within 1 year. So therefore, what we see is that it's almost guaranteed to fail. But at the same time that we know that it's guaranteed to fail, what we tell people is eat less, move more. Right? None of these approaches has any proven merit. This is from one of the sort of Bibles of diabetes, Jocelyn's Weight Loss, the Handbook of Obesity, and all of them say the same thing. Dietary therapy is the cornerstone. Reduction of energy intake is the basis of successful weight loss reduction. But we know that the results are known to be poor and not long-lasting. So how can that be the basis of your advice if you know it doesn't work? Like, are you not just setting people up to fail? So that's the problem. Experts say that it's guaranteed to fail, so our best advice is to do that, right? I mean, holy. Like, this is the best the geniuses at the NHS can come up with? So there's 2 problems with this sort of eat less, move more approach, and they're fairly well known, but one is a slowing metabolism. Okay, so if you eat less calories, your metabolism slows down. Again, not really new data. This comes from 1917. So this is 100 years ago that they knew this. They took people and they were eating about 2,500 to 3,000 calories. They cut it by about 30%. So they put them on these semi-starvation diets, around 1,400 to 2,000 calories. So not that low compared to what a lot of people recommend these days. And what they found was that the people found themselves almost impossible to keep warm. What the reason is that their metabolic rate, so this is the energy that you expend to keep your body sort of running. So this is to keep your heart pumping, to keep your lungs moving, to keep your liver working, to keep your brain going. It decreased by about 30%. So if you reduce your calories in by about 30%, your body responds with a decrease in caloric expenditure by about 30%. So that's why you feel so cold, because you're not generating the body heat, because it takes energy to generate body heat. And then afterwards, you immediately eat and then regain that weight. So that was 100 years ago that they showed this. In the Ansel Keys' Biology of Human Starvation, they showed the exact same thing. So despite the title, it was not actually a starvation study. In fact, what it was a calorie-reduced diet, which is about 1,500 calories, which again, a little bit shocking these days to realize that this is the level that most people recommend. So if you talk to people who advise weight loss, usually cut your calories to about 1,500. And again, it was about a 40% reduction in caloric intake, and it was almost immediately matched by a 40% reduction in metabolic rate. And here they measured very detailed measurements of physiology. What they found was the heart volume shrank by 20%, the heart rate slowed, the body temperature dropped. So again, the heart needs energy, so you get less energy, so therefore you reduce your heart rate, you reduce your stroke volume, body temperature drops, and so on. And again, if you move into the modern era, we have the exact same data showing that there's a very close matching of caloric intake and caloric expenditure. So this is a very nice study by Rudy Leibel, 1995. So again, not new data, 20 years old. And what he did was he took volunteers and he manipulated their weight. He used a sort of a shake thing so he could control their diet very precisely. He made them gain weight 10%, and then he moved them to a normal weight, and then he made them lose weight. And then he measured their energy expenditure at each of those points. So at initial weight, as they gain weight, what happens to their calorie expenditure? Well, it actually goes up. So you're burning almost 500 calories per day more than you did before. So your body doesn't simply keep storing it. It actually is trying to burn off all of those calories that you put on. As you move back to your initial weight, you see it goes back to normal. And as you lose weight, your caloric expenditure drops. It drops by about 300 calories, 400 calories per day. So again, all the studies show the same thing. So as you overfeed people, their calorie expenditure goes up. As you underfeed people, their caloric expenditure goes down. So what happened in The Biggest Loser? Well, here's the data. So what was interesting is in one of the seasons, they actually got permission to study their metabolism. And this is what happened to them. So over the time period of the show, you can see that they lost a lot of weight. So if you look at their weight loss, it's almost 60 kilos at week 30. So really, really impressive. And it's not all muscle loss. You see that the majority of it is fat loss. So wow, that's terrific. They dropped from an average of 329 to 202 pounds, and body fat percentage went from 49% to 28%. So really, really fantastic results. Well, what happened to their metabolism? Well, here's what happened. Their metabolic rate goes down in every single case. So you see, for example, this poor guy who starts off burning 3,600 calories a day. At the end of it, he is burning about 1,600 calories a day. He dropped 2,000 calories per day of energy expenditure. That's a huge hurdle if you're going to try and maintain that weight loss. It's almost impossible. Because is he eating less? Oh, hell yeah, he's eating less. But it doesn't matter, because even if you're eating 2,000 calories, so assuming that he's at 3,600, he's eating 3,600 and staying stable. Even if he eats 2,000 calories, this poor guy is going to gain a heck of a lot of body fat. And that's because of his slowing metabolism. So people assume that you can make up for it with exercise, right? That's what the show says. You can make up for it with exercise. You can't. So even at the end of week 30, which is the end of the show where they're doing amazing, you can see that their basal metabolic rate, which is divided between this is the basal metabolic rate, this is the exercise sort of portion. So this is the kind of resting metabolic rate, this is the non-resting, so the kind of exercise portion. So as they're losing weight, it's already going down, but they're making up for it with like 8 hours a day of exercise. And you can't stop it. They haven't been able to stop it. That exercise is not increasing your metabolic rate. Why would it? Like, just because you exercise doesn't mean you're going to give more, you're not going to put more blood into your liver. You're not going to increase your body temperature. So this is the problem, the decreasing metabolic rate. And we all hope that this metabolic rate goes back up towards normal. But it never does. Over a year, if you lose weight, you can see that the total energy expenditure goes down and it stays down, even over a year. And this is what happened to The Biggest Loser. So this was the article in the New York Times where they looked at people as their weight goes down. That's great. It comes down very nicely, but they all regain the weight, and it's because the metabolism goes way down, and then it just keeps going down. So at the end of it, they're burning 800 calories per day fewer, except for this guy, Rudy Pauls, who had gained a lot of weight. Then he got bariatric surgery, and then he lost it. What's interesting to me is that nobody really remarked on the fact that look at his metabolic rate. It goes back up. That's really, really interesting, because this is the guy that you want to know what he did, which is the bariatric surgery. So the problem is, this problem is the metabolic rate. And this is the reason that the calories out, calories in, calories out model is completely incorrect, because it all assumes that there's a single compartment for energy. So that's not the way the body works. It's not like all your calories, which is really just sort of food energy, goes into a single compartment and everything comes out of that compartment. The issue is that there's actually two ways. If you have energy in, so imagine yourself as a power plant, right? Your body's like a power plant that's producing energy, and you're putting in energy. You can either store it as fat, or you can put energy in, say, as coal, and you can burn it off. Well, there's really two ways that this energy in goes. So it's not simply energy out, right? So everything, the calories in, calories out model kind of just assumes everything goes this way, but really it can either go as energy out or as fat stores. So what we hope happens is that as you reduce your energy in, you'll reduce your fat stores. But again, that is only true if your calories out or energy out stays constant. Okay, so the calories in, calories out model assumes that your basal metabolic rate stays constant. So that's what we've known for the last 100 years does not happen. And that's why it doesn't work, because what really happens is that as you reduce your energy in, your energy out goes down, and your fat stores are completely unaffected. So as you make that adaptation to lower energy intake, your fat stores stay the same. The key problem is not the energy in. The key problem is this, where the energy goes. It's an energy distribution problem. Because if you eat a lot, you could simply burn it all off and you won't gain fat. So the problem is not the amount you eat in. The amount is this. What controls this? So everybody kind of assumes that, hey, if you put in less energy, what will happen is that you'll get less energy and you'll get some of this from this and goes into that. And again, that's really what doesn't happen. And it's like, why can't you do that, right? So if you eat 2,000 calories and you're burning 2,000, why can't you cut it down and you'll get a little bit from fat and so on? And the reason is it's this switch here, because your body really runs according to what energy is coming in. And there's kind of two tracks. You can burn food, or you can burn fat, which is stored food energy. But the key is that you have to switch between them. And you can't do both at the same time. And the main switch is insulin. So in the fed state, where you have a lot of insulin, what happens is that you really switch to this track. So if you have 2,000 calories of food, you burn it. But you don't get any from your stored food, right? In technical terms, what we say is that if you have a lot of insulin, you're going to turn off the storage. You're going to turn on storage of food energy, but you're going to turn off lipolysis. You're going to turn off gluconeogenesis, that kind of thing. So when you're burning food, you're not going to take any from here. Why would you, right? When you eat, insulin goes up, tells you need to store food energy. You're not going to take food. You're not going to burn food energy at the same time. The body's just not that stupid. In the fasted state, when insulin falls, so assuming you go to sleep, then your insulin falls. Well, there's no food coming in, so you detach that and you switch over to this, and now you're burning the stored food energy. So that's the glycogen. So low insulin turns on gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, and lipolysis. And that's been known for a long time. But what happens is that you can't take it from both. And that's what you assume that you do when you simply reduce your calories. You assume you can take a bit from here and a bit from here, but you can't. You have to be in one or the other state. You're either burning food, you're burning fat, or you're storing it. But you're not doing both at the same time. And that's why you have this problem with the decreased metabolism. Because if you keep your insulin levels high, if you have insulin resistance, for example, or if you're eating all the time, like 6 meals a day, then what happens is that as you reduce your calories, your insulin's still high, so that switch still stays up here. Therefore, if you only have 1,500 coming in, you only have 1,500 coming out. So you feel cold, you feel tired, and you feel hungry. And that's exactly what happens to all of us. The second major problem with this kind of caloric reduction as primary sort of strategy is hunger. And again, we know for sure this happens. What this study shows from the New England Journal of Medicine is that this was published in 2011. And what they did was they took people and they made them lose weight, and they made them maintain it over a year. And so you see that as you lose weight, they measured something called ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. and peptide YY, which is a satiety hormone. So if you look at ghrelin, what you see is that after a year of weight loss, maintaining it off, your ghrelin levels are, this is baseline, this is weight loss, right? Week 62, week 10. Your ghrelin is much higher. Basically, you're a lot hungrier. Peptide YY shows the same thing. It's much lower. So therefore, you're not as full because it's a satiety index. So what you see is over this time, which you always hope it goes away, but it never does. That hunger never really goes away when you lose weight this way. At the end of 52 weeks, so even after a year, you're hungrier than you were before. And that's almost an impossible hurdle to overcome. Because again, it's one of our most basic sort of human instincts, right? It's sort of one of the big 3 F's, which is our basic needs, right? Food, fluids, and procreation. So this is the whole problem, is that our body actually sets a certain weight, and it wants to maintain that weight. And if you try to lose weight, this is what we know happens. You reduce your energy expenditure and you increase your hunger. The bottom line is you're going to gain that weight back. And we know this because 99.9% of people fail. And yet when we fail, we blame them. We say, oh, you just have no willpower. But it's not some hocus pocus. They are hungrier than you were. They are hungrier than they were before. They can't control that. You can decide not to eat, but you can't decide to be less hungry. You can't decide to burn more energy. And yet we pretend that it's all up to them. It's not. It's all physiology here. So that's the problem. That's why people can't lose weight. And it's the most unfair thing we ever do to people is that we know going in that they're all going to fail. And when they do fail, we blame them for it. Because the vicious cycle of undereating is that as you lose weight with this sort of caloric reduction, you have decreased energy expenditure, increased hunger, so you regain that weight. So then you kind of redouble your efforts and eat even less calories. But the problem is, then you lose a bit more weight, you get a bit more hungry, you decrease your metabolic rate some more, and it just keeps going round and round and round. It's impossible to win. So exercise has always been kind of sort of an equal, right? Diet and exercise. And it's not like we're not doing exercise. If you look at the leisure time activity, you can see that as we've become more obese, we've exercised more. There's actually a very tight correlation between exercise and obesity. So it goes up, right? And it's not that exercise causes obesity. I think people who, as they get obese, start to exercise more. But what it means is that we're clearly not having the effect that we wanted to. And again, we all assume that it's going to be effective, but if you look at the randomized controlled trials, it really doesn't show that at all. If you look at this cohort study from the Women's Health Study, so again, they divided people at the beginning of the study and the end of the study, and what you can see is that those people who exercise more weighed less at baseline. So if you didn't exercise at all versus kind of an hour a day, 6 days a week. But again, over almost 10 years, what you see is that their weights stayed roughly the same. So even if these people are doing 0 exercise, 10 years later, these people have exercised an hour a day for 10 years, but the difference in weight is identical. So it's just not that effective. It doesn't work the way we think it does. And there's lots of trials to show this. There's this one on aerobics, and they didn't really lose a lot. There's this one where they made people do a marathon, and it didn't really work at all. The men lost 5 pounds, but the women lost 0. And you might think, well, but they're healthier. But they actually showed no change in body composition. So they went from 0 exercise to running a marathon, and they didn't lose any weight, and they didn't lose any body fat. So that really wasn't worth it either. So this is what all the studies show, and this is a well-known phenomenon in exercise physiology. It's something called compensation. So as you do more exercise, you might increase your caloric intake, and the other thing is that you decrease your exercise outside of that prescribed exercise. And that's the reason why the average weight loss is only 30% of what you predict. What that means is that if you are exercising all day, so if you're a physical laborer, so you're a construction worker, you're lifting concrete all day, when you get home, you're not going to say, hey, you know, I should go for that 10K run. It just doesn't seem that appealing. But if you sit in front of a computer all day, you get home and go, whoa, that run really sounds like a lot of fun. So you go out and you do your running. But so that's what happens, is that what you do outside of that prescribed exercise is going to depend on a lot what you did during that prescribed period of time. And you see this in kids as well. And this was a study a few years ago, 2009. And what they did was they took children and they measured how many steps they made, they took, kind of thing. And they had one group which had no phys ed, physical education during school, and another one which got a little bit more than an hour a day, 9.2 hours per week of prescribed exercise in class. At the end of the week, what they showed was that whether you got the exercise in class or not, the total number of steps was the same. Again, it's the same. The kids who had all that physical activity in school, they got home and they watched TV. The kids who sat in class all day, they got home and they went outside and played. It kind of makes sense. And we know that this happens. And so that's what this is, compensation, right? So yeah, I'll go to the gym, but I'll take the escalator to get there. And it happens to all of us. It's just human nature. And even the amount of calories, if you think about calories, the energy expenditure during exercise is little. So now I'm not assuming you're doing 10 hours a day, sort of like Biggest Loser sort of stuff. But if you do what most of the older kind of diabetic people that I treat, it's like you might walk for 45 minutes. And that's really great. But if you think about it, your calories intake is 2,000 to 2,500. And that 45-minute walk might give you 102 calories, which is like barely 4% of your daily caloric intake. So if you've ever done a treadmill where they go and look at that sort of calorie expenditure, it's very low. You see that thing goes up very slowly. So it's really only 4%. So again, if you have diet, which is responsible for 96% of your total energy expenditure, and exercise, which is only 4%, then you really should be concentrating on the diet. So that's how you get results like this, the eat less, move more, where you get no results at the end of it. But the ultimate proof is really all of us, because we've all done it. We've all tried that calorie restriction and do a little bit more exercise, and basically we've all failed. So all of this kind of comes together, all the proof, all the randomized trial, all the physiology, but also all the clinical experience says the same thing. This sort of thing doesn't work. So in order for you to lose weight successfully, there's two things. One is the metabolic rate, and two is the hunger signaling. In order to lose weight in the long term, you have to be able to control those two. And one of the ways that you can do it is something called intermittent fasting, or fasting where you don't eat for a prescribed period of time. So again, if you think about the two-compartment problem, what you have is that you have energy in, you have energy out, and you have fat stores. The critical issue is this signaling, this partition, which is all about insulin. Where does the energy go? And if you take out the energy in, really there's only one way for it to go. Basically, you need to get it all from your fat stores, and that's the point. This is what happens during a period of time where you don't eat. So this is Kevin Hall, actually. He fasted people for 30 days. And what you see is that this is where the energy comes from. So the carbohydrates initially come up, but then you go down very quickly. So all those carbohydrate stores only last for like a day and a bit. The fat, what you do is you get energy from your fat stores, and protein, which initially is up a little, goes down, and it kind of stays down. So you're not ramping up your protein burning in order to get energy. You're getting it from fat. That's like exactly what we want to do. So physiologically, it makes a lot of sense. What happens to energy expenditure? Well, everybody says if you don't eat, your metabolism will go down. But that's not what actually happens. If you look at over 4 days of fasting, the metabolic rate doesn't go down. So this is the weight. So your weight goes down steadily over 4 days of fasting. But if you look at the resting energy expenditure, it starts at 39.7 and it ends after 4 days of nothing to eat at 44. Your energy expenditure went up by 10%. And VO2, which is how much energy you're doing, how much oxygen you're using, does the same thing. Basal metabolic rate didn't go down, it went up. even as your insulin and glucose go down, what happens is that you're making up for it with ketones and fatty acids. So what you're doing is burning. And norepinephrine, which is a counter-regulatory hormone, so remember you have these hormones that run counter to insulin. They tend to bring glucose up. Norepinephrine or noradrenaline goes up. And that's one of the key reasons why you're maintaining your metabolic rate at a higher level, at its stable level. Even after 22 days, so this is alternate daily fasting. One day you eat, one day you don't eat. Again, if you look at the resting metabolic rate, you see that it starts out at 66.75, it ends at 63.29, but there's actually no statistical difference between the two. You increase your fat oxidation, and you decrease your carbohydrate oxidation. So that's very good. This is a study that was just published last year on people, again, alternate daily fasting. At the end of 32 weeks, so half a year of alternate daily fasting, here's what happens. You compare calorie restriction versus alternate daily fasting. So calorie restriction reduces your calorie expenditure by 76, a P of 0.045, which means that is statistically significant, whereas the alternate daily fasting reduces it by 29, in other words, with a p-value of 0.4. Again, no statistical difference in your metabolic rate at the beginning and the end. So that's the huge difference between the two. And this is the difference between the Biggest Loser, where you're doing caloric restriction, and that guy who did bariatric surgery, which is that your basal metabolic rate, in fact, it goes down. So this is Biggest Loser contestants. It goes down, stays down. A Roux-en-Y bypass is the bariatric surgery. Initially goes down a bit, but then it goes back up. And that's the difference between success and failure. You're able to maintain your basal metabolic rate. The other thing is the hunger signaling. You don't want to be hungry. And we can measure those things called ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. And we all assume that if you don't eat for a period of time, that you'll just continue to get more and more hungry, then you're going to stuff your face with donuts. That's not actually what happens. If you measure ghrelin over a 24-hour period of fasting, what you see is that at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you do get a spike. So obviously there is a bit of learning involved. So we've learned to be hungry at these times. But what happens, for example, if you don't eat lunch? Well, your ghrelin just goes back to baseline. Same with dinner. If you don't eat dinner, well, it just goes back to baseline. And that's what you have to understand about hunger, is that it doesn't continue to build. Because if you don't eat lunch, and we've all had that experience, you're so busy, you kind of worked right through lunch. By 3 o'clock, you forgot that you even skipped your lunch. Why? Because your body was able to provide you that food energy from its stores, from its stored body fat. So if you look at multiple days of fasting, again, what you find is fascinating, because everybody assumes that if you do 3-4 days of fasting, you're going to get more and more hungry. But this is ghrelin, so it does go up, but over time what you can see is that it's slowly going down. So as you fast longer and longer, your hunger actually goes down. If you look at men and women, because some people say, oh, women should never fast, what's fascinating is that this is men. Men have this effect where you see that go down, but women have this huge effect where the hunger just goes down and down over time. So is it effective for women? 1, yes, and 2, it may actually be more effective in women than men. So if you're able to, if you compare the weight loss strategies between fasting and caloric restriction, they're actually nothing the same. This one increases hunger and decreases metabolism. So then you look like this person, which is like, don't talk to me, right? But then if you're doing fasting, your hunger decreases and your metabolic rate stays stable, then you're like, yeah, love it. The problem with fasting is that there's all these myths that surround it. One of them is that you're going to burn muscle, right? And for that, you can look at the studies again. So this is a study of alternate daily fasting. So once again, you can compare the fat mass, which goes down nicely after 70 days of alternate daily fasting. And here's the fat-free mass, 51.4 kilos at the beginning, 51.9 kilos at the end. So no loss in fat-free mass with alternate daily fasting. That study I told you about last year where they compared calorie restriction to fasting. So here's the trunk fat mass, which is the really important fat that carries around the waist, which is important for metabolic for diabetes and so on. So calorie restriction only gives you 0.3% off, and alternate daily fasting gives you 1.8% off of your trunk fat mass. In other words, like 6 times better for that. But here's the lean mass. Calorie restriction goes up by 0.5%. Remember, there's a percentage. So as you lose more fat, your body, your lean mass percentage goes up. But alternate daily fasting goes up by 2.2%. So if you're talking about preservation of lean mass, fasting is like something like 4 times better. I'm just going to skip this in the interest of time. But this is the other thing, is that everybody says, well, females shouldn't do it. It doesn't work for females or postmenopausal females. Well, this is the studies of fasting that came from many years ago, from the 60s, because they haven't done many lately. And what you can see is that both men and women show really the same rate of weight loss. It averages half a pound of fat mass per day of fasting. So it's for both for men and for women. And you see that there's, and they're doing like 30 days of fasting here, you see that there's no slowdown. It just keeps going, which kind of makes sense because your body still needs energy, so therefore it must burn fat. So there's a huge number of advantages that you find in fasting that you don't in the other ones. One is that it's a very simple thing to do. People understand it. It's free. So this is the thing about pairs, right? So if you're trying to do something like bariatric surgery, and there's studies that show that it does very well, but it's impossible to do that on a population-wide scale because the costs are prohibitive. They're very expensive surgeries. Whereas if you simply translate that knowledge to people that yes, you can fast, yes, you can do this, yes, here's an effective weight loss strategy that's completely free. It's not just free. You're going to save money because you're not eating, but the government will save money because you're going to be a lot healthier. It's a way to stay healthy rather than a way of treating illness. And that's the really important thing. It's convenient because you're going to be able to save time. You don't have to shop. You don't have to cook. You don't have to eat. So if you're really busy, then you just skip lunch and just keep working. And then you get an hour back from your day every single day. And that all accumulates. It's flexible in that you can do it sometimes and not do it sometimes. If you go on vacation, you can decide, I am not fasting. I am not doing any of that. I'm going to enjoy myself. That's okay, because you can do it more later. So you can bring it on or take it off as you need. And that's the way people have always done. People have always done feasting when it's prescribed for it, and fasting. So there's the holy month of Ramadan, there's Lent, there's all these prescribed periods of fasting that people have always really used. And you can use it to any diet. So whether you don't eat meat or wheat or nuts, or you don't have time, or you don't have money, or you're traveling, it doesn't matter because you can still fast. It just doesn't matter. So the one thing that appeals to most doctors is that it really has unlimited power. That if you look back at those studies of 30 days of fasting, I'm not suggesting that anybody do that, but you can keep losing weight. And that's what doctors love. So if you give a drug like metformin, for example, there's a maximum dosage. The reason doctors love insulin is because you can just keep prescribing insulin until you get the effect. It has unlimited power, and fasting has that same unlimited power. You can just keep fasting until you get to your appropriate weight. It's okay. It doesn't really matter. And that's really what we're talking about, is a way for people to get healthy and kind of break free of those chains of illness. Because we're not talking these days about illness from tuberculosis or bubonic plague or whatever. The modern day plague is really this. It's really obesity. It's all about metabolic syndrome. And the thing is that we have this huge crisis ahead of us. We all know about the obesity epidemic, about the type 2 diabetes epidemic, and of course type 2 diabetes, where you have amputations and heart attacks and strokes and cancer, dialysis, all that sort of thing. And that's all treatable. That's all curable. That's all preventable by these simple dietary manipulations to reduce insulin. And it's not something that's, some pie in the sky. You can do it tomorrow. You can start back on the road to getting healthy tomorrow. Anybody can do it. It's really just a matter of disseminating information. I'm not talking about building huge infrastructure to do bariatric surgery or whatever. It's all there. It's all free. It's all part of our human heritage. And that's it. All we have to do is let it be known. And that's what we're trying to do with the PHC. Because we have to let it be known that the dietary advice that we've been given doesn't work. And we have to do better. Because that's what they owe us. They owe us something that is effective, not something that's 99% failure rate. That's ridiculous. And so we have to be heard, and that's what organizations like the PHC are so important, because we have to lift our hands and our voices. That's really what we're here for. Thank you.
Hey, fatty! Today I'm going to talk about how fasting cures inflammation. And I'm going to show you a blood test that I had done after I ate McDonald's for 30 days with a lot of fasting involved, and how my C-reactive protein levels were so low that the doctors could hardly even pick them up, which is a direct indicator of inflammation levels. So, C-reactive protein, a substance produced by the liver that increases in the presence of inflammation. Anybody that's got cancer, that's sick, has irritable bowel syndrome, cold, they're going to have high C-reactive protein levels. Anybody that's extremely healthy is going to have super low C-reactive protein levels. Okay? So, this is a direct indicator of health. And, just for a little side note here, insulin spikes promote inflammation.
Insulin spikes promote inflammation.
Guess what causes insulin spikes? Geez, every time
Food in your mouth 20 times a day or
your snacks. This is exactly why fasting is absolutely crucial to optimal human health. Everybody can do it, but I've even heard stories of people that were 91 years old with cancer still beat the cancer. So, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my blood test results from when I ate McDonald's for 30 days and show you my C-reactive protein levels, how they were so low that they couldn't even pick them up. So here's my C-reactive protein levels after 1 month eating McDonald's right here. My reading was less than 0.1 milligrams per liter. Off the charts low. Like, you'll never get a number like this unless you're eating a crazy high-fat diet with quite a bit of, with lots of fasting. Okay? Or a pile of fasting, period. You'll get these kinds of numbers even eating carbohydrates. Fasting is the point I'm getting at here. The top end unit that they use for their reference range is 8 milligrams per liter, which I think is fucking high. I think that anybody that's at 8 milligrams per liter isn't that healthy. You want to be as low as possible. Fasting gets you low because fasting cleans all the fucking toxins out of your body and all the mutated fucking cells. One of the reasons why fucking fasting will literally cure cancer. I might sound fucking crazy for saying this, but it's been done. It's nothing fucking new. So, those are my blood tests for my C-reactive protein results. So I just showed everyone my C-reactive protein blood test results after eating McDonald's every day for a month, which is full of toxins, and my C-reactive protein levels were still so low that they couldn't even pick them up. And low C-reactive protein means zero inflammation. Plain and simple. If you have high C-reactive protein, you got high inflammation and you got fucking health issues. Simple as that. So everybody, start fasting, educate yourself on fucking fasting. It is basically, fasting is absolutely necessary for optimal human health. I don't give a fuck who you are. The only people that might not be able to fast are going to be people that are so lean that they can't fast because they have no fucking fat left on their body at all. And I'm lean right now and I'm still fasting like crazy for days on end. Or somebody where their health is so fucking far gone from previous bad lifestyle choices that they can't fucking fast. The general population can fucking fast. No matter what. It's simple. We've been doing it since the fucking caveman days. So everyone, have a great day and get that fat in ya!
Hey guys, it's Casey. Welcome to this episode, and I really wanted to take a minute to talk to you about why snake juice is so important. Why is it pushed? Why do all of us snake dieters talk about that it's so crucial for you to have a successful fast by using snake juice? And because I've had a lot of people contact me and say, well, I'm doing the fasting thing, but I'm not using the snake juice. I just can't handle the taste. It's too gross, or I don't like it. But I wanted to give you like a real scientific reason for why we promote the snake juice. What's different about it than just plain water? Why do we need it? Okay. So I want to break it down to the basics. So we got 4 ingredients that we're going to be putting in our snake juice. Well, technically 5 when you count the water. So in your snake juice, you start with a bowl. You fill it full of 2 liters of water. The first thing you add is a half teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have pink Himalayan salt. Can't I just use regular salt or iodized salt or whatever? You have to get pink Himalayan salt. And the reason why you want it to be pink Himalayan salt is because it has certain properties that other salt does not have. So number 1, I'm going to go over these. So it has 84 essential nutrients and minerals. It also is a massively awesome source of magnesium. It promotes pH balance within the body. It regulates your blood sugar, and it helps to regulate your sleep cycle. All things we need. Okay, that's your first ingredient. The second ingredient you put in is potassium chloride. Powder, not capsules. It's very important that you actually have the powder. Okay, not tablets, not capsules. So potassium chloride, it helps to reduce blood pressure. It reduces your risk of heart disease, which is a huge killer. It also balances the acids within your body and helps to keep them neutralized. And then it actually helps you to have better hydration. So when you have water, it actually uses it properly and you get the most out of your water. Of the potassium chloride, you add 1 teaspoon to your bowl, okay? Third ingredient is baking soda. A lot of people try to skip this step. The reason why baking soda is so crucial is it is amazing for our kidneys. So we really want to have it part of this recipe. So it's a natural antacid, so it'll help with things like heartburn. It's naturally alkalinizing. It helps to boost your kidney function and detox the kidneys, and that's phenomenal. It also reduces joint pain. It even enhances the effect of exercise. So you get more out of your exercise, and who doesn't want that? And lastly, it is excellent for reducing uric acid in the body, which is what leads to gout. And so even if you have gout, you can actually add baking soda to your water and it will help to remove that uric acid faster. Of the baking soda, you want to put a teaspoon of that as well. So 1 full teaspoon of baking soda. And then your last one that you're putting in your bowl is Epsom salt. Now make sure that this does not have anything but just plain Epsom salt, and it says on the back that it can be used for constipation or whatever. That way you know it's food grade. Some Epsom salts are only meant for bathing in, and they have other added dyes and chemicals and whatnot. You do not want to be drinking those, so just be sure you get food grade Epsom salt. And the reason why we want Epsom salt is because it is the best, most bioavailable source of magnesium. And magnesium is one of those things that we can't just take magnesium and then we just have this big storage. It actually gets used every single day. So it's one of those things we have to replenish all the time. And when you don't have magnesium, you start having things like joint pain and aches and just feeling kind of like inflammation and just kind of all over. Your body just gets overwhelmed. And so the Epsom salt, it will help reduce the inflammation in your body, which will then lead to reducing pain in the body. It also aids in digestion, and it aids in your exercise recovery. So it will help you recover your muscles faster after you've exercised them. And so of the Epsom salt, you want to put a half a teaspoon into your bowl. Now you got your 4 ingredients plus your water. You're going to mix it up really good with a whisk. And then I really prefer to drink mine out of a glass bottle. And I know that may sound silly, but if you have tried things, if you've ever tried drinking something, the same item from multiple different cups, you realize it actually does change the taste and the way it comes in. So I really recommend putting it in glass bottles, it just tastes better to me than storing it in plastic. And that way too, if you leave it in your car, it's not like you have to worry about, the BPAs or any of that crap getting into your water. So another thing to know is this combination that we've made with the snake juice, it's actually like almost exactly what is in a bag at the hospital when they put it in your IV and you're needing to get rehydrated. So it's a perfect balance of electrolytes and minerals that you need. And so the reason why we really want to have this when we're fasting is because it's tough to fast. Like, let's be honest, it's not easy. And so if we're going to be doing this, let's do it where it's the most efficient and effective way of fasting. And so by having the snake juice and not using anything else to drink, and that's just your one drink, you will do better, you will have better results, and you don't have to use as much water. So when you're having snake juice in a day, and that's the only thing you're consuming, you need at least 2 liters, and you can have more, but you really don't have to have more than 2 liters unless you're exercising. If it's a day that you're exercising heavily, use 3 liters. But 2 liters in general will keep you very well hydrated. You will not feel lightheaded. You won't have the shakes. You won't have any of the normal side effects that we get when we fast if we're only using plain water, or if we're really stripping our body and drinking tons of stuff like teas and coffees and all this stuff that just strips our body of all the sodium. And we need those things, the sodium, the magnesium, the potassium, we need all of it. So I really encourage you. I know it's not the best tasting thing, but you can do it. And I just encourage you to really use the snake juice as part of your fasting routine, and you will do so much better. You'll have better success and you'll feel better. So you won't regret it. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. And I hope you guys are doing awesome in your fasting. Don't give up. We're getting close to Christmas, and I know this time of year is hard. So it's a great time to go, okay, maybe I had a crazy weekend and I ate some things I shouldn't have. Do a reset. Monday, Tuesday, do a 48-hour fast. It will help you so much if you just have at least once a week a good little reboot fast. If you can't do the 48, at least do a 24. But I'm sure you guys can handle it. If you're trying to still lose weight, you need to be doing that every single week, a minimum of a 48 to a 72 every single week if your goal is weight loss. If you're just trying to be healthy, get your best out of your health, and you're wanting to maintain weight, at least do OMAD, where you're just eating 1 meal a day for a few days a week to reset the body, to give your gut a rest, and to make you feel better, and to be stronger, healthier, and younger looking. Thanks, guys. Have an awesome day.